Lopez.
Present.
Ms. Johnson. Mr. Bowie. Mr. President, are you here as well?
Present.
Mr. President, you have quorum.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Hayworth. Quorum has been determined and the state board will now proceed. Members, you have a draft agenda before you. Are there any corrections or additions to the agenda? Seeing no changes, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
It has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The agenda is approved for our meeting. We now have the minutes from our September 1st working session. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes?
So moved.
Being moved, is there a second?
Second.
Being properly moved and seconded, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Nay. The ayes have it. The minutes have been approved. And we will now proceed with our meeting. Good evening again to members of the public. I am Zachary Parker, the Ward 5 representative and president of the State Board of Education. On behalf of the members of the State Board, I welcome our guests and our viewing public to our Wednesday, September 22nd public meeting. It is again being held virtually due to the pandemic. The video for all of our meetings, including tonight's, are posted on our YouTube page at DCSBOE and rebroadcasted on the District Knowledge Network. Tonight, the State Board is trying out a new agenda format. We are hopeful that by shifting our panel discussion earlier in the meeting, we will be able to provide ample time for public comment after the panel, as well as providing both the panelists and public witnesses a better sense of timing for their testimony. Further, we are testing a new public witness sign-up form that will allow us to group testimony together by subject. This would allow greater depth of discussion by focusing the questions from period to period on similar topics. Our panel discussion tonight is centered on ensuring that students are able to travel to and from school safely. There are an unacceptable number of barriers that prevent student mobility, including neighborhood violence, traffic patterns, the lack of transportation mobility options, and more. We will explore these barriers through our discussion tonight and welcome members of the public to engage with us. We will also be considering 3 ceremonial resolutions, an appointment resolution and a vaccination mandate for the 3 offices of the State Board. Before we continue with our meeting, I would like to take a moment, as has been our tradition, sadly, to remember those who we've lost to the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you, members. We will now proceed to comments from Acting State Superintendent Grant. Welcome.
Thank you, President Parker, and good evening, representatives and members of the public. I first did want to thank members of the board for the continued warm reception and taking time out of your schedules to meet with me. It really has meant a lot in my early days of my tenure. It's good to be with you all this evening. I hope that you all are home safe and dry. Last evening, myself along with President Parker testified before the council on school reopening efforts. I was pleased to see board members express their views to the council during the portion of the hearing devoted to public witnesses. I admire and appreciate your efforts to amplify the voices of constituents that spoke to you at your August meeting. And I want to be responsive to that feedback with some of my remarks this evening, but I also encourage you all to review marks from last night. We continue to monitor our efforts and our enrollment numbers really closely this year. And although the numbers are preliminary, over 90,000 students have enrolled in school. The vast majority of our students are attending school in person. The COVID-19 vaccination continues to be our most promising weapon against this microscopic enemy. And I encourage everyone in Washington, D.C. who can be vaccinated to get fully vaccinated. This week, Mayor Bowser issued an order requiring all adults regularly in schools and in childcare centers to be vaccinated by November 1st. And student athletes aged 12 and over must be vaccinated to participate in school-based sports after November 1st. These steps are an important next step to making sure our schools can stay open for in-person learning. However, we must continue to improve our efforts to increase asymptomatic testing in our schools. It's important to test and promptly respond to positive cases so we can keep school communities safe and keep schools open. LEAs, charters, and DCBS have access to testing through services from a contractor or through subgrants to procure their own vendor. In the OSSI managed service provided by Shield T3, we have a goal to randomly sample 10% of students each week. When students take their test, results are reported directly to families and schools and staff within the vendor's results portal. Additionally, we have taken more steps to be transparent about our testing efforts in our schools. Every Wednesday, we will share testing data on the DC coronavirus website for the week prior. We also heard the feedback on the information we are providing, and we are working with our vendor to include more information regarding testing on the website in the coming weeks. We thank you for the feedback, and we will continue to improve on our services. We continue to support our schools to help them implement testing and contact tracing. This week, we announced a new opportunity for public charter schools to respond to positive cases of COVID-19 and provide clinical services for symptomatic symptoms. Our Division of Health and Wellness continues to provide routine technical assistance to LEA staff to get questions answered as fast as possible. It is critical to remember that this is all new work for our schools, yet our efforts to respond to COVID-19 today will continue to serve us today and in the future. We must continue to improve until all of our steps are implemented with fidelity. At your last public meeting, public charter schools provided feedback on the $10 million DC Public Charter School Reopening Grant. We have communicated with our charter schools on this grant, as was requested. The purpose of this grant is to provide public charter LEAs with funds for facilities related to expenses that address or mitigate the economic and public health impacts of COVID-19. These services may include cleaning staff, HVAC upgrades, and other systems. Each public charter LEA will receive approximately $84,000 for each facility that the LEA operates in the current school year. We provided preliminary allocations to charter LEAs in August, and the grant application is scheduled for release in October. Schools may use this funding for allowable expenses made from May 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. This addresses several of the issues that were raised at last month's meeting. My staff and I are interested in listening to your panels this evening on Safe Passage, which aims to help our students get to and from school safely. We look forward to advancing our work on educator preparation standards at the upcoming October working session. We will also be providing the board with an update on the release of the DC school report card. Thank you for the ability to service you all. Thank you for letting me speak this evening. And I hope to continue to be in close communication with you in the weeks and months ahead. As discussed, I will be popping off screen, but I will be listening to the entire meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Grant. Members, we will move to the public panel, or I shouldn't say public panel, the panel portion of our meeting. We've unfortunately had some updates that two of the intended attendees to share with us tonight were not able to make it. Our student representative, Mr. Bowie, as well as principal of Center City Public Charter School, Ms. White, will not be able to join us tonight. We will have CEO of Friendship Public Charter School, Patricia Brantley, as well as our Chief Student Advocate, Dan Davis. And so, as was originally planned, each panelist will have 5 minutes for their testimony, and then we will do a round of questions from members for 3 minutes. and Mr. Hayward will run the clock while we ask those questions. I see Ms. Brantley, it's good to see you. Welcome. And I'm looking for Mr. Davis. Oh, there he is. And I see Mr. Davis. Good to see you as well. So we're going to let you go first, Ms. Brantley. You have 5 minutes and you may begin.
Thank you, President Parker and members, for inviting me to speak with you this evening. I was originally prepared to talk about the reopening of schools and the best practices we are implementing within Friendship to keep our scholars and staff safe. I was prepared to describe the high quality learning opportunities and social emotional support we are providing so our kids thrive. But in light of the tragic deaths of 4-year-old Zaire Joshua earlier this year and 5-year-old Allison Hart more recently, both struck by cars on our city streets, and in light of what seems to be a continuous onslaught of news of children and teenagers struck down by gunfire and other weapons in this city, it is right that this board has shifted the conversation to safe passage. At the schools that Friendship operates in this city, we understand that our responsibilities go beyond just educating the children in our care. We're responsible for putting structures and processes in place to ensure safety and to facilitate safe passage. At our schools, we require staff to cover entry and dismissal outside of our doors, at the bus stops across the street, at the metro on the corner, and so on. We often ask cars to slow down. We try to make sure that our relationship with kids are deep and trusting enough that we hear about conflicts and concerns so that we can intervene and head them off. We do lots of things that go beyond reading, writing, and arithmetic. And frankly, we understand that it is necessary, but we also need your help. As I see it, there are 3 areas we must focus our attention to ensure the safety of our children. First, we must provide for the safety of students outside of our school buildings during entry and dismissal. Next, we must ensure the safe passage of our students as they travel from home to school and back home again. Finally, we must increase access to effective social emotional supports and violence prevention interventions to reduce safety issues overall. We need to ensure safety that is physical and emotional. We should double the number of adults outside of schools during pickup and drop off. These must be good people who know our kids, who have good relationships with them, and who are trained to spot trouble and de-escalate. For the first time in over 18 months, large numbers of students are returning to schools for in-person instruction. With much more complicated entry and dismissal procedures for all schools, we need more support for these functions. We need more buses and more shuttles to get students home safely. Sometimes the last few blocks are the most critical transportation need, especially for young students. There have been many stories about bus driver shortages and canceled routes. Our schools need more options and more capacity. This might mean special buses that come to schools after dismissal, specifically for students to shuttle them a few blocks to common bus routes. We are thankful for the DC School Connect program, which is providing shuttles for 2 Friendship sites, but we need a massive expansion of this program in the city to more schools. Finally, our schools and our communities need more money for social and emotional supports. Many students are returning to schools with significant trauma. We cannot wait until that trauma manifests to act. We must be proactive. We need more social workers and counselors in school and in our communities. At this moment especially, we must demonstrate our care for the whole child in order to serve students well, but also to ensure the health and safety of the wider community. In the last 18 months, there's rightly been a great deal of discussion about how to prepare for the return to school for tens of thousands of students across the district, how to ensure that students could safely come back to their classrooms given COVID-19. It is important work, and we're so happy to have our scholars back in our classrooms and learning in person. But nothing is more important than guaranteeing that every child returns safely home at the end of every day. That is a mission we simply cannot fail to achieve. I yield back the balance of my time, and I'm happy to answer to any questions this board may have for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have our Chief Student Advocate, Dan Davis.
Good evening, President Parker, Vice President Gasoi, members of the DC State Board of Education, Superintendent Grant, and staff. Thank you for this opportunity to testify. My name is Dan Davis, and I lead the Office of the Student Advocate. As we return to school buildings, safety while traveling to and from school is a recurring issue for many of our students and families. The safety of our students traveling to and from school is paramount. We know that instances of neighborhood violence creates barriers. Safety of our students traveling to and from school is paramount. We know that instances of neighborhood violence creates barriers that have profound impact on our students and families to access education in our city. The effects of violence reverberate through school communities long after an incident. Attendance suffers as families keep students home. Tardiness increases as students avoid quicker routes out of fear of victimization, and behavioral problems in the classroom and at home appear as students become hypervigilant about their personal safety. Since our office started serving DC students and families in 2015, issues related to student safety continue to be an obstacle. We have hosted community meetings, gathered stakeholders, and volunteered along with parents and staffers on community-based walking school bus pilots, but still more is needed. As a city, we have yet to produce a solution for keeping all students safe from community violence. Currently, there are promising efforts that promoting restorative justice practices based conflict resolution practices in schools. To strong examples of cross-sector collaborations between LEAs and violence interrupting organizations and public safety agencies, and citywide investments in the toolbox students and families have for safe passage are launching this school year, with shuttle bus programs and community-based safe passage workers joining the Safe Spots program. Unfortunately, community violence is not the only challenge to students safely traveling to and from school. Students compete for sidewalk space, bike lane access, and standing room on metro bus and trains every day with workers, commuters, and tourists during rush hour. As cranes continue to dominate our skylines, sidewalks clear of detours, debris, and heavy equipment are rare. Bus shelters and bus stops without broken bottles and discarded needles are even rarer. Too often, students must make decisions about stepping into the street to avoid debris or temporary detours. And when families do vocalize concerns about these challenges, they seem to go into the bureaucratic ether. The recent collapse of a walking bridge that covers 6 lanes of highway this past summer still presents a difficult decision matrix for some students and families who use that bridge to avoid crossing a multiple entry intersection, getting access to the metro, and to avoid neighbors from community with a historic conflict. Prior to the pandemic, our office held in-person focus groups and surveyed more than 400 students related to their safety traveling to and from school. This past school year, we released Safe Passage, a student's perspective report, highlighting the lived experiences of the students traveling to and from school in the district. The full version of the report has been submitted with this testimony. It can also be found online. Too often, decisions about student safety are made without input from students and families. In particular, students whose lived expertise should direct the investments into Safe Passage. Though violence was a central topic when discussing Safe Passage, there are key themes that emerged based on the perspective of those students who participated in the survey. Inconsistency on what safety meant, street harassment, and mental health were the dominant issues that students identified. The following recommendations were concluded based on those themes. 1, we must redefine at the state level what safe travel to and from school is, what it looks like, and how students should experience it. Most students reported feeling safe traveling to and from school, but a significant portion of those same students said they felt either uncomfortable or concerned while traveling to school. The majority of students disclosed they must always be aware of their surroundings. There needs to be an intentionalized standardization of what safety means at all DC schools. We need to create solutions to address street harassment in schools and in our communities. An alarming amount of students reported experiencing traumatic instances of street harassment, from adults making inappropriate comments towards students to instances of sexual harassment and assault. Too many students worry about these interactions on a daily basis during their commute. The community-centered solutions to address street harassment as laid out in the OHR's State of Street Harassment in DC should be coordinated to expand within school communities across the district. 3, we need to ensure behavioral health resources are more accessible for students. Students shared that they have had very significant experiences as the victim of harassment, assault, or robbery. Unless the trauma of those events are addressed by providing those students with support, they will continue to suffer harm and potential loss. Students must be provided the proper coping mechanisms to manage the effects of those events without causing themselves or others harm. The coordination of accessible student behavioral health supports is integrated with how the city provides student safety. Is a necessity for all DC students. The Office of Student Advocate remains committed to amplifying the voices of students and their families while pushing for meaningful solutions. We will continue to capture the voice of students throughout the school year as safety needs continue to evolve. We're currently planning to learn more about the experiences of elementary and middle school families as well. Thank you for your time in creating the space to testify. If there are any students or families who are currently experiencing any safety-related issue, please give us a call, 202-741-4692, anytime Monday through Friday from 9 to 5. We heed the rest of my time back to the board and look forward to any questions or comments that I can answer.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. And if you could increase the volume on your microphone, at times it was a little hard to hear you. And I also just want to note before we turn to member questions, I fielded 2 texts already. DCPS was invited. In fact, Chancellor Farabee was invited to be a part of today's panel. As DCPS is one of the largest LEA in our city, but unfortunately he was not able to join us. And so with that, members, if we can raise our hands for questions, we will have 3 minutes per member, and you will see the clock. And Mr. Hayworth, are you going to do the honors?
Sure.
Awesome.
Mr. Patterson.
Thank you, sir. I want to direct my question at Ms. Brantley. First and foremost, I want to thank you for all that you do in your leadership of friendship and your collaboration, not only just for charters, but across the city as a whole. I enjoy working with you, so I just want to tell you publicly, I truly enjoy your dedication to our children. In your opening statements, you referred to 3 areas. I'm going to ask a question on the 3rd particular one where you talked about violence interruption. And I kind of want to get your perspective, because I respect it so much, of what do you see the role of violence interrupters, if you have them in your school or use them? How do you see their role playing out? How can they be a little bit more effective? And to touch on a little bit also, how can we use them in that social emotional area? Because a lot of these kids, as everyone has stated, they're coming back after 18 months of not interacting. A lot of things have happened on social media, and now they're all together again. And a lot of things are kind of just happening, which has resulted in some violence. So I would love to hear your perspective on how we use them and how effectively we could use them.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. And, schools are institutions within communities, but we are not alone in the work that needs to happen. And so you'll often hear schools, of course, you always hear us advocate for a greater per pupil or more money for facilities or what we need. Violence interrupters need to be connected to the community. We need people that are on the ground hearing what's happening so that they can alert schools to do their part while we have people in the community doing their part. So the first thing I would say is that we have to make sure that we have enough funding and support going into community-based institutions and individuals who are hearing things that we might not hear in school. So that's number 1. We have to be able to work with people that can come into schools, and we do our part, but they also do their part. And so I'm always an advocate for more social workers that are in our community-based organizations, for more violence interrupters that may not be in schools, but help us to understand what's happening in the community. I think the other part is that, yes, we have to welcome all members of our community in so they can talk to us about what struggles students have in their neighborhoods, maybe before they're coming to school. We have to understand that maybe you can't go down, a particular street, but you have to go down the other side. I think we have to understand that. We were fortunate at one of Friendship campuses because principals from neighboring schools all got together to talk about, are we all dismissing at the same time? And then you've got lots of groups of children converging on the same metro. And we saw that when there was sort of police presence or et cetera at the metro, it would be at 5 or 6 o'clock when the commuters are going home, not at 3 o'clock when thousands of children are all converging on to one site and just might need help. Similarly, in terms of transportation, if we don't have buses outside of school at 3 o'clock, or if the buses are all full and they're passing by students, then you've got, students who are frustrated, who are trying to get home, and now they're outside without transportation. But to get back to the point about violence interrupters, critical for doing the work outside of school and helping schools understand where we can do better and when there are places where we need to intervene.
I do apologize, Ms. Brantley. I do need to cut you off and go to the next person. But thank you very much. Dr. O'Leary, 3 minutes.
Thank you, Ms. Brantley. I'd like you to continue. My question was about social and emotional learning and the funding for those very important people. And if you could just, I'll give you the rest of my time and just talk about that. Because I don't think that, and I guess the question is, how do we get the leaders in the city to understand that 18 months away from a building, all it does is breed what's going to happen, especially when Mr. Patterson was talking about social networking and things like that. It's not the same. It's not the normal, the old normal. This is a completely different time. And so you have it.
Thank you so much. And I apologize. I'll watch the time better. We have children that spent most of their last 18 months on Zoom or Google Classroom. We as adults know that we can send a text message or an email and maybe it doesn't come across the way we intended. So if you had an interaction on Zoom or Google Classroom and now you're in person with children who maybe didn't understand that you didn't meet it in a certain way, our kids need help navigating that. The other difference is that some children were 7 or 8 years old and now they're 10 and now they're interacting where they haven't had a chance to develop those social skills with each other. And so we need to ensure that we're putting as much money into helping them understand, interact with each other, make the friendships that they didn't have a chance to, get connected to the adults, that the adults who missed out on the 18 months of kids in person understand that when child A goes quiet, that means they're really struggling. Or maybe the other child who's talking too much means that they're struggling. Those are things that we have to relearn, and we need both the time for it, but we need the trained personnel for it. There's been social services grants in the District of Columbia where we may get social workers from a grant. We can't really rely on discretionary grants for what is a critical, ongoing, daily need for our children and for our educators. So thank you for the question.
Thank you so much.
Mr. O'Sullivan.
Davis, I've got 35 seconds. Mr. Davis, please make sure your sound is up because I know you're a soft-spoken guy and I'll read your transcript, but I have no idea what you said.
Thank you.
I tried.
Mr. O'Sullivan.
Thank you, John Paul. I have 2 questions. The first, I'll go to Mr. Dan Davis. I know we've spoken a number of times about Safe Passage and there being partner sites for students to go to when they're walking home from the metro, or if they feel that that there may be someone watching them. There are some partnerships with different businesses they can step into and feel safe. How, if at all, has that changed during COVID? And maybe what I'd say, if you all have been able to monitor that first couple of weeks of school, how would you say maybe that's been implemented if it's being done successfully?
I think that's a great question, Representative. So part of the challenge with safe spots during COVID is they experienced the same challenges all the other businesses and organizations had during these past 18 months. Several locations have closed due to not being able to stay competitive. Other locations have rearranged the way they allow customers to enter their space. Safe Spots is essentially a program that allows students to access businesses, community-based organizations, libraries, firehouses, what have you, to alleviate or get away from whatever's going on in the community immediately outside of those businesses. Since COVID, there's been a lot of our partners, be it barbershops, convenience stores, beauty supply stores, have reworked the way they allow folks to enter their businesses, and that's also caused them to really reevaluate how they are interacting with the program.
Thank you so much. And then Ms. Brantley, I have about a minute. You mentioned more how you think having more adults available outside during pickup and drop off would be beneficial to you. I know that's one of the big issues at my school, or at least a big concern first couple of weeks. I'm wondering how things are at Friendship in that regards, and then how you think having more adults could help you guys with that daily practice.
So that definitely remains a concern. So thank you for the question. We have students coming in for entry and dismissal, but our procedures have changed. And so when you have to screen each student who's coming in or restrict their parents from walking them into the building, we're starting to have large groups queuing up outside. At the same time, people are still trying to get to work, and so traffic safety becomes an issue, as you may have students who are walking up but having to wait because they're queuing up, or you may have cars that are queuing up and other cars trying to pass them. And so we're very concerned and think that we need to look at the number of security guards, particularly where you may have multiple schools on a particular corner. So example, Dunbar, Friendships Armstrong, Mundo Verde, and then you go a block or two down and you have one of the Kemp campuses. There's a lot of traffic, and the fact that our procedures might slow students coming into the building is causing real issues.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Reid.
Good evening, everyone. I wanted to raise and get the panel's thoughts on, I know City Council Member Representative Christina Henderson and a variety of colleagues co-signed, legislation, proposed legislation related to safe passages, primarily to establish an office and a number of things. And I believe also like grants related to man the block initiatives. And I think a few of us might testify. I'm not sure, but I'm just curious if this panel has any ideas or thoughts around that legislation as written. And for the public, I believe that the hearing was October 26th, but I don't see it on the calendar at the moment. So I just want to get that word out. But back to the panel, if any folks have any ideas about your sentiments about how that bill is currently written.
I will certainly jump in and say that we're definitely supportive of the idea of microgrants that could provide support. Over the past year plus, there have been concerns around SROs in schools and outside of schools. And we certainly understand why those concerns exist, but many more schools open this year without having those resources. What I find in the best of SROs, or at least for the ones, and some of them have been connected to Friendship for 15 plus years, is that they know the students and they know the community and they can provide help. If we're changing what the program is, microgrants could help us to identify people who can act in the place of making sure that students are well known, they're safe passage, they're in the community, and we would provide more supports at school in a time that I think it's really critical to do so. Thank you.
And Dr. Reid, if I may add into that, your question, is that what I'd like to see is some coordination and who those micro grants are given to. A big thing that we see is that our children, since they move from ward to ward and traverse our whole city and stuff like that, that if they're going to do these grants and these people are going to be in these positions, that they're actually coordinating with each other. It's interesting when you have kids that travel all the way from Ward 8 all the way over to Ward 5 or any other ward, Ward 7, whatever ward we're talking about. And if you don't make those connections as far as being able to talk to each other, those groups that are going to be doing this work, then we're doing it all for nothing, because the violence can transfer without anybody ever knowing we'll be in the same spot. So I would like to see something in that about that.
And then with, I think, 16 seconds, the thought on having an office, or is there currently a space in DC government that could host it, or should there be carved out specific space for this initiative?
So Dr. Reid, I believe that there will be there are a lot of the things that are mentioned in the current legislations are, some of it is ongoing right now from the DME, but I do believe that there is room for that work to grow. And I think the office could be a great benefit to students and families as a central coordinating place. Right now, when we talk about safe passage, we're talking about a myriad of agencies from DDOT, our public safety agencies, our environmental work agencies, our student transportation agencies, and all of them have multiple points of contact. Part of the challenge schools and families face with kind of communicating their issues is getting that runaround from saying, if I need a crossing guard at my school building, who do I go to? How can I get this? How can I make this work? And who's going to be able to move that quickly forward? So I believe if we are going to create an office of safe passage, that office needs to be able to move things forward quickly across agencies and kind of across district government kind of bureaucracies.
Thank you very much. Dr. Sutter.
Thank you. And thank you both to you, Pat and Dan, for all that you've shared already. So I share Dr. Reid's affection for policy implementation questions. So I want to focus my efforts there into like, how do we actually bring this work to bear? So Pat, you mentioned this idea of like additional adults, which requires additional funding, but also I'm curious, are these adults who you would like to see full-time employed by an LEA or a school, or are these folks who you would like to see in relationship with the school, but perhaps serving, via the city? Like, how do you imagine that work happening? Are these grants or these hires? How does that work?
So I think it can work in many ways. First, if we're talking about social workers and mental health supports, I do think we need more community-based resources that can follow kids and families that may be across schools or across communities. We are always going to need social workers and more in schools, but talking about safe passage, there are things that happen outside of schools where we need coordination for family supports where it's necessary. Talking about safe passage in terms of people in the community who can do violence interruption, I think that happens outside of schools. We often need people that are working between our school and other LEAs. And we need them to be neutral and able to understand and be discreet about what's happening that may be across several locations.
Mm-hmm. So what that sounds like to me, and makes sense to me as well, is that there's a need for the district to invest in community-based resources that are designed to serve children and families and can do this work associated with safe passage to and from school, but need not necessarily be education related expenses, because these are really community resources. I know when we get into the nitty gritty, like sometimes this comes up in budget conversations, like, well, where does this money come from and who does it benefit? The other question I wanted to ask is sort of building on the last question that was just discussed around the resources that would go to, I've lost my train of thought. So let me ask this other question instead. Dan, you talked about the definition of safety. Can you talk a little bit about recommendations, and Pat, I'll ask you this as well, for what that definition should include?
So I think part of the challenge with the definition of safety and what we noticed in the survey was that students were obviously describing unsafe situations and saying that they were okay and that's normal. The problem there lies is that if all of our students are experiencing these challenges and saying they're normal, they're never going to step up to adults to reach out for help or reach out for that support. Mm-hmm. So what we really need to do is, as the adults, as the school leaders and policymakers, is to say, okay, this is what we want as the benchmark for safety that all students should be experiencing, and that students should have that opportunity to look to the input and say, this is what safety looks like in my perfect world. If I'm on the train, if I'm on the bus, this is what I should feel when I'm traveling, if I'm walking from the front door of the building to the car. This is what I should experience and this is what I should feel. Here are the people that I should interact with and how those people interact with me. This is how I should come away from those experiences. Right now, we have some schools that do it great, some schools that need more support with it, and some schools that it's not something that's on the radar. We really need to kind of define for students as we have a great selection of choice here, what it means to be safe, across the board in any school setting.
Thank you. That's my time.
Ms. Wattenberg.
Hi, thank you. This has been very interesting, and thank you very much for your time to both of you. Let me start with Ms. Brantley and ask if you could just explain how I guess it's the DC School Connect program works. Who pays for it, who gets the money, where, and I gather it takes the students from the schools to the metros, but is it every school? How does that work?
So we were invited to participate in the program for 2 friendship sites because they were in empowerment zones or areas that were needed. So it's not all of our campuses or schools. I can't tell you how the money's coming through, but it's being coordinated through the DC for hire vehicles. And so there is a shuttle service that will pick up students at a common location and then drop them off to a common location, not necessarily school to home, but certainly closer, and is for many of our students a much safer alternative to them finding their own way home. My understanding is that there are 25 schools or school sites that are currently involved in the pilot, but it could be expanded. And just to be very brief, I remember when I first came to take a job in DC, and the workplace across from me had a shuttle that would take employees 1.5 blocks to the metro. And we don't have a problem doing that for adults, right, who can get themselves to work. It is certainly an option that should be considered for children. We just need to expand it.
Dan Davis, could you just sort of fill out the picture she provided if you can? I mean, she's got it from her school point of view, how it looks more citywide.
Yeah, so the program is currently designed for the 26 campuses or 25 campuses in wards 7 and 8. They're open to both DCPS sites and charter sites. The shuttle, Ms. Brantley is correct, the shuttle services right now is coordinated through the Department for Hired Vehicles. The shuttles, they generally hold around 15 to 10 students, and they provide those common drop-off locations. And so schools are using, students were identified by their school leaders and their principals. So it's not every student in those campuses are accessing those shuttle services, just the students that have been identified and have gone through the consent process with parents and notification.
So both campuses are being identified, and then within the campuses, the students, and who is doing that? The school presumably is identifying the students, but who's identifying the campuses?
So I believe LEAs were contacted that were in Ward 7 and 8, were provided the opportunity to apply or enroll into the program.
Okay,
so
thank you. That's my time. Thank you.
Thank you. And for just as a note to our guests, if there are additional thoughts that you have, feel free to share them in the chat, and we can also follow up with you afterwards. We really do appreciate all of the insight that you're providing. Ms. Thompson.
Good evening. I think my question is for Dan, so hopefully we'll be able to hear Dan's response. I would like you to talk just a little bit more about some of the engagements, like the types of engagements that have been included in your Safe Passage work thus far. Like how you got to a point where you knew what students were saying and knew what they were experiencing, and like what, if there are any lessons learned around how that engagement worked.
Right. So the Office of the Student Advocate, we've been consistently involved in Safe Passage work since 2015. A lot of that work was a lot of the work that we're doing now is built on the work of Dr. Goodson Hubbard, who spearheaded the office before I took over. We spend a lot of time connecting with students and families, as well as school leaders and folks in the community that care around student safety. And so we had community meetings, community gatherings where we sat down and talked about what are your neighborhood issues, what are your ward issues, how can we work on these things together and focus on solutions that are built upon the capacity that we have in this room right now. And so a lot of that work was done from school leaders. A lot of that work was also being relied on by students. And so, we met with students in Ward 8, students in Ward 7, as well as students throughout the city in different meetings. But the long and short of it was that students were driving the conversations around what will work for their school, what will work in their school community. The school leaders were driving those conversations around, hey, this is the capacity that we have, and our community folks were able to step in and say, this is how we can augment those efforts.
Thanks for that, Dan. And Ms. Brantley, I really appreciate you raising the issue of where the adults come from and it being a community resource, and also just thinking about those places where, like you mentioned, Dunbar. I know in Ward 7, the Friendship Campus that we have is right there on Minnesota Avenue Metro Station, and Ward schools come together. I was out there 2 weeks ago witnessing dismissal. And so I just really appreciate the nuance that you are looking at this with and that you are raising, and want to thank you for that time and attention.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lopez.
Good evening, everyone. I really, well, first of all, thank you to Mr. Davis and Ms. Brantley for giving us your time and taking your time to speak on this topic. I really appreciated Ms. Brantley bringing up the topic of social and emotional well-being. I think that for the past year and a half, we've been so focused on being safe from COVID that we put aside the social and emotional well-being, not just for the students, but for everyone in the staff building in the school. So my question is for Ms. Brantley, and I was wondering, how do we incorporate more resources for social?
Ms. Lopez, I believe we've lost your audio. Can you hear us? Ms. Lopez? Ms. Lopez, can you hear us? I think we've lost your audio.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I think we can hear you now. If you can go ahead and start again, and we'll start your timer over.
Thank you. I'll just start with the first question. I was asking, how do we incorporate more resources for social emotional well-being into the routines of students inside and outside of school?
Thank you. So first, we always think about hiring more adults and what adults can do, and that is part of the solution. But students come with their own strength and assets, and so we need to think about how we resource our students and give them space and time and make mental health and social emotional development as integral a part of our curriculum, if you will, as we do things. So what does that mean? Town hall meetings, restorative justice, circles. There are other things that we can do with students, interacting with students. If we think about micro grants, can we train students to recognize concerns within each other, and then they can raise that back to staff? So the first thing I would say is I think we have to look to students themselves. The other thing is that, yes, we've got to make sure that we are, and I put it in the chat, when we're thinking about safety, there isn't a lot of common data. And if we had common data that we publish regularly, we could figure out where we need to intervene and where we need to resource. I don't want to take up all of your time, so I'll stop there.
Thank you. My second question kind of leads on to what you were talking about in curriculum. So would it be effective to at least have the first 5 minutes of one class for social emotional learning, whether that's drawing something of how you're feeling or something that's going through your head that's keeping you behind or that's bothering you?
Absolutely. And in fact, in younger classrooms, we often have what we call morning meeting, where students have a chance to share. And sometimes I think that we forget that students need that throughout the entire period, whether they're 3 or 4 years old, or 13 or 14, or 16, 17, 18. We have both morning meetings in friendship schools and what we call advisories that students can go to every day, and they get a chance to talk about what they're experiencing, and they're tied to adults that are mentors for them. We do have to train people, so that we need to have a regularly available or easily available curriculum that we can train adults for helping guide students through those kinds of conversations.
Thank you, Ms. Brantley.
Thank you very much. Vice President Gasoi.
Thank you, and thank you to both of our guests. This has been very helpful. My question is about, I'm hearing that we need more adults. I have been talking about, an all hands on deck approach since the beginning of the pandemic. We really need many more hands, and more coordination and more communication is another message I'm hearing. I'd like to hear your thoughts on what that should look like. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, your audio went out for a second, so if you could go ahead and start again, and we'll go ahead and restart your clock.
Sorry. So my question is, how would you imagine, first of all, getting more adults to the schools, and should schools be the ones to, decide what they need, and, where would they come from? I guess I'm just trying to imagine how you get double the number of adults, and where do they come from? And then also the communication and coordination piece is an added level of complication, right, that we need to address, but it's urgent, right? So I'm just wondering if you have thought through, where that might come from, how it might look. And I guess related, we do have community and connected schools. And do you think that that might be one way, like expanding that model would be one way of addressing this issue? Mr. Davis, why don't you start, because we haven't heard as much from you.
No problem. So I think the adults, we have natural resources in our school communities that are kind of undertapped. We have parents, we have grandparents, we have the candy lady down the street, we have, the neighbors to our school buildings that love our children, that love our communities, that are eager to engage and become partners. And they're the folks that are doing the work. They're doing that work now. They're the folks that are, they will make sure and walk around to their neighborhood and get all the kids and that are going to be late because there's maybe a little bit of rain or snow out there, and they're going to walk those children from the neighborhood to the school building. And in almost all the school buildings I've ever visited or I've ever been in, there's always those type of adults that are connected to the community, that are stepping up in PTOs or stepping up in bake sales, that just step up regardless. Those are folks that I think that meet that gap between the resources and support that we need with social workers and the resources and supports that we need from our violence interrupters. Not all of it, I think part of the challenge with violence interrupter work is that those people are special. That's a special skill set, and they're few and far between. I think that's part of the challenge with trying to identify those type of folks. And when schools find those type of folks, you can point them out. They're always there on campus. They're always available for young people. Their students love them. But those folks are hard to come by. And so there are other people, other adults in the community that can kind of step up and fill that void. And so I think as we think about resourcing and creating positions or creating space for adults to be on campus, to be with young people in the community, we should really think about the adults that are already on campus, that are already engaged in our school communities, and how we can kind of give them tools and resources to do the work that we're looking to do.
Thank you. That's my time. Thank you, Mr. Davis.
President Parker.
Thank you all for being here with us today. A couple of years now, I did a tour of Ward 5 high schools to just hear what was top of mind for students. And the number one concern around safe passage that I actually heard from high school students was their engagement with Metro Police and or adults connected to like police institutions, but uniquely it was Metro Police, which I found very interesting. So I have two separate questions. Ms. Brantley, from an LEA perspective, it has been my experience that there are some challenges to the extent to which LEAs are having to cover things outside of the bounds of school. So I'll give you an example of dismissal. Dunbar, McKinley, Kemp, all in this hub, those schools had to coordinate, send out adults to kind of coordinate things outside of the bounds or off the grounds of the school. And so just how are you handling these challenges with the reality that the very people that often you might call on are seen as in conflict with students, or students do not see those individuals as a resource, if that makes sense?
Well, yes, we've been here a very long time. And so we know the people, and we make it our business to know who's there for our kids, who's supportive, and who we need to call on that will provide the right kind of respectful support. And so that's a part of it. Yes, we definitely understand that sometimes members of lots of different agencies might not see their role as being a role of supporting kids versus controlling what's happening in their sphere of influence. And so we've been fortunate because we have had school resource officers and others that have been with us for a long time and that they know our kids. So that relationship is tantamount, right? And we would call on them first. But also the people that we employ, I don't know that this should be the job of schools, but it's absolutely a job that schools have to take on to keep kids safe. We're out at the Metro. We're outside. We have to do that work. And so we will continue to do that work and employ people that we know reflect our values and have respect for our children.
I'm running out of time, but yeah, that latter point, I would love to just learn more around what are the challenges with having to do more of that, having more of your personnel, employees manning training platforms or watching students as they traverse back and forth to school. And Mr. Davis, I just really appreciate and want to go on record as saying the work that you and your office continue to do around this topic. So thank you. That concludes our panel discussion. This was really, really informative. Ms. Brantley, Mr. Davis, as you likely heard earlier, we are continuing our discussion around safe passage into October, and we're happy to share with you to get very real and specific feedback from your respective contexts to help strengthen it. And if you're open to that, we'll be sure to share. But thank you for joining us tonight and providing perspective.
Thank you.
As was mentioned earlier in the meeting, we are exploring and working to change the order of our meetings to both better align on time, but ensure that the public comment and members' questions can be better informed. And so what we're going to do now is turn to, I think we're going to vote on ceremonial resolutions, if I am not mistaken. Nope, I'm wrong. We're going to go to the public comment portion of our agenda. And this is where we are hear from public witnesses on a range of educational matters. For members of the public, your comments become part of our official record. If you would like to speak at a future meeting, please sign up on our website at sboe.dc.gov or contact our staff by email at sboe@dc.gov. Tonight, we have 14 witnesses, including those who have submitted written testimony. We will be holding to a strict limit of 3 minutes for our witnesses. While you speak, there will be a timer if you set your view to gallery mode. Following each group of public witnesses, we will pause for questions from board members. Members will then have 2 minutes for questions for our witnesses, and that 2 minutes includes both the question and the response from the witness. Mr. Hayward will call the witnesses as we'll mute our witnesses or board members that exceed their times.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am going to, I'm bringing folks into the meeting now. We are waiting. A number of them were watching on YouTube, which you know has a slight delay. And so I am bringing folks into the meeting now. And so I will repeat a little bit of what you said. We're having a little bit of audio issues hearing you, Mr. President, but I'm going to repeat some of that information for our witnesses that are currently coming into the meeting. Each of you will have 3 minutes to testify, and then we will do rounds of questions of 2 minutes. I will be calling the witnesses in order of that they are on the agenda. And then I will also be calling questions as well. If you do exceed your time, I will need to mute you. And so my apologies in advance if I need to do so, but I will let you know when your time is expired. If you will set your view to gallery mode, you will be able to see a timer that is part of it's one of the videos that will show up for you to watch. So we will begin tonight with Ms. Fuchs.
Hey, hello. I'm trying to get to the timer on my phone and I am not seeing it. So I'm not sure what's going on with that. So I can't see a timer and I don't have a written testimony because my laptop's in a shop. So you're getting Laura unfiltered today. Could be for better or worse. So you'll just have to cut me off at 3 minutes because again, I'm scrolling. I can't see a timer. All right. So Laura Fuchs, I've been teaching for the past month in person and I'm a little concerned at how like normalized super dangerous conditions are already becoming. We're trying to get students to mask. We're trying to have some procedures, but social distancing is a myth. We knew that before we came into the schools. It's still a myth now, which makes the close contact definitions hilariously sad because basically DCPS is acting like their fake ideas of what they put on paper are happening in reality, and therefore they don't conduct what really would be meaningful contact tracing, and they don't involve the practitioners in that process. And we need to rethink how we're doing this in our schools if we're going to keep our schools open and try to mitigate spread and mitigate the damage. If the goal is to keep our students in person, then we have to do everything we can to contain the virus. And right now, every single school is a super spreader just waiting to happen. I know that I'm being exposed to COVID every single day. I know that my students are being exposed to COVID every single day. And sorry, I can't see the timer now. I found it. Thank you though. So it's frustrating that as an educator, I'm barely being informed of what's happening with my students. I just found out 2 of my students came back from quarantine. I didn't realize they were being quarantined. I just thought they were absent because it was first period and they were missing first period. And I mean, I am putting things online for them to do, but like, it's just hard when there's not real communication as to what's going on. And it makes my job harder. And it increases the likelihood that things will continue to spread and that students will continue to get sick, and that's just not acceptable. And it's not going to keep our schools open in person. Like eventually we're going to get shut down if this keeps getting worse. So we have to do more. We have to do 100% testing. We have to make sure that we are telling people who can then actually conduct contact tracing. And we have to consider educators and people in the classroom to be close contacts because masks are not being worn with fidelity and it's impossible to really keep kids spread out. So I'll stop there. We've heard it before, but it's not getting better.
Thank you very much. Ms. Baum.
Hi, good evening. My name is Maya Baum. I'm a fourth grade teacher at a Ward 2 school. I'm coming here tonight a very tired, stressed, and scared teacher. The conversation around the last school year and the start of this year was heavily focused on trauma-informed practices, teaching to the whole child. I was naively hopeful. We're well into our fourth week of school, and I can assure you all that that is not what is happening. DCPS is instead continuing business as normal by pushing more forms of standardized assessments and rigid pacing calendars on teachers and students. I'm sure many of you are thinking this strategy could make sense because of learning loss, but allow me to explain to you all how this is playing out in our classrooms. We are not back to normal. This year is not normal. I have a group of 22 students who spent the last academic year with vastly different educational experiences because their educational experience included whatever was happening at home with their families, was contingent on the type of technology access they had, and whether they had the ability to be engaged with virtual learning, which I didn't. I'm finding that my fourth graders have the coping strategies, emotional literacy, behaviors, and academic stamina of second graders, which is the grade level they were in the last time they attended school in person. As I said, we're now in the fourth week of school, and we only started fully teaching the academic curriculum last week. According to DCPS, we are behind. According to my students, it's too early. They require a lot of practice and time to complete tasks, and everything takes longer as we're trying to follow COVID safety protocols. This is my experience and the experience of most of the teachers I know in the district. So why is it important for us all to understand this? I believe it's highlighting how unnecessary and damaging standardized testing is to our students, teachers, and well-being of our schools. I know the board is working on submitting its recommendation to OSCE regarding our current school evaluation system. As you discuss what to include, please consider these remarks from a seventh-year teacher. Standardized testing should be limited and should be used to inform, not punish and control teachers and schools. Whether leaders want to acknowledge it or not, when an evaluation or performance rating is tied to standardized test scores, it creates a culture of stress at the school level and causes learning to be catered towards the test. The punishment schools face by receiving a low star or a low rating is harmful. Low ratings push families away, which causes enrollment to drop, and that results in less funding for the school, which may actually need more funding to supply their students with the resources they need to improve academically. Schools should not be punished because students and teachers are struggling with the weight and stress of these racist and biased standardized tests. And if you're unsure why or how these tests are racist and biased, I highly recommend Ibram X. Kendi and Dr. Bettina Love and their work. The LEA should be held accountable for the well-being of their schools and tasked with equitably supporting all schools, regardless of test scores and ratings. It is problematic and concerning noticing schools with low stars primarily serve Black and brown populations, and schools with high star ratings primarily serve wealthy white populations. If we truly want to be a more equitable school system, we'll move away from using high-stakes standardized tests and move to a dashboard model. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Law.
Yes. Thank you, John Paul. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. All right. I was about to say good morning. That's how tired I am. Good evening, President Parker and members of the State Board. What I'm about to read to you, guess what? I'm probably sure most of you got this in your emails, but it's important that this community letter be put on the record, and it's just important that I put my story on the record. So many of you know me. I'm Miss Law. My daughter's Abria. I live in Ward 8. Abria goes to Rocket Ship Legacy Prep. She's in the 5th grade, and she's also a student with multiple disabilities. I just sent her back to school yesterday from being quarantined for 10 days. And so basically the school called, said, hey, close contact, we're shutting the entire cohort down. You all know the deal. Now, my anger and my frustration and my worry and my tiresome comes from the fact of, okay, the school's getting money for my kid, right? Like, we're getting federal money, we're getting local money, we're getting all this money, but we're not educating her. That's a problem. I think everybody on here knows that. Like, that's just not okay. Like, sending a work packet home. Seriously, I'm in school, I'm at work full time. Y'all know I work at AJE. Everybody, most of the people on here know. Like, I'm a single mother, right? So it's not the same as, oh, she's just at home, okay, and I can finagle it. No, like, it's completely different. And so it's just been really, really frustrating. And her not receiving an education is not okay. And you all know that's against federal law. And honestly, it's just downright stealing if we're going to sit up here and accept money to educate kids, but we're not really educating them. It's just not okay. And so apparently a lot of families felt my frustration. got a lot of feedback, and we all just put a community letter together. For the record, Dr. Reid, President Parker, thank you so much for signing on. But some of the things that we talked about were, one, we had to come up with a system for schools not to just threaten families with CPS because they're afraid of COVID. That's just not sustainable. It's not going to work. We need to have a mandated standard virtual option. I think that'll help with the community spread. Also, I know some schools have like this kind of cohort model where they try to help stop transmission. Maybe that can be system-wide. Also, speaking of system-wide, y'all know how I do. I don't care if you're charter, don't care if you're DCPS, don't care if you're a child care facility. It has to be a community united response, because if it's not going to work. You have families out here that have multiple children in multiple situations across the city. We know that the mayor talked about vaccinations, utilizing outdoor space. It's a long letter. We had a lot of points. Also, maybe hiring DOH for contract tracing for the schools to just give that support to schools. I think schools are just taking on a lot right now, and it's just not right. We talked to council about emergency legislation, but in regards to special education, I only have 5 minutes left. Honestly, if you all could hold a hearing on special education and COVID, that would be wonderful. And what a great place to stop. Thanks, John Paul.
Thank you, Ms. Law. Mr. Kemp.
Good evening, President Parker and members of the State Board. My name is Terry Kemp, and I'm the school support social worker at Kingsman Academy Public Charter School. Our school is located in Kingsman Park in Ward 6. I'm before you today to make you aware of an urgent need in our community and why we need your advocacy and support on behalf of our students, families, and the entire city. If I may be specific, our students need a school-based health center. A health center physically located at Kingsman Academy will be a major resource for the students at Kingsman. The children and families will also benefit in the school's neighborhood. Kingsman Academy was founded in 2015 to serve the students who have been most underserved in our city. We serve approximately 275 students from ages 11 to 26. 93% of our students are designated as at risk, and more than 2/3 are overage and undercredited. Our students come from 7 wards, with over 60% from wards 7 and 8. At least 20% of our students are experiencing homelessness. Kingsman Academy assesses the needs of each individual student and develops a personalized academic and non-academic intervention to meet those needs. For many students, we must first address the non-academic needs to enable them to be ready for the academic learning. A school-based health center would allow us to better meet our students where they are. It's challenging to focus on math and reading with unaddressed health concerns. Students need a safe place to address medical needs and get to the root of the problems. They need a place that they can trust, where medical providers understand their needs because they have built relationships. They need medical services provided in places where stigma just doesn't exist. Our students' health needs extends beyond COVID-19 and includes chronic disease management, medical and nutrition screening and education, Tier 2 and higher mental health services, trauma-informed care, substance abuse support, and reproductive health care. For example, we have a pregnant student who has issues with nutrition and high blood pressure. She needs a team of clinicians that can create a medical and mental design to service her appropriately with healthcare interventions so she can have a healthy pregnancy and birth. We also have a 19-year-old student who, with an IEP, suffers from random seizures and needs trusted medical professionals to help him address his health condition so he can successfully manage it long-term, as well as administer medication as required.
Thank you, Mr. Kemp. I apologize. You are out of time. If you can go ahead and provide additional comments in the chat, we need to move on to your colleague, Ms. Kelly.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Ms. Kelly, go ahead and begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening, President Parker and members of the State Board. My name is Kennesha Kelly, and I am co-founder and executive director of Kingsman Academy Public Charter School and a Ward 6 resident. Kingsman Academy is located in Ward 6 and serves 275 students in grades 6 through 12. The school offers a competency-based academic program and a therapeutic approach to personalized learning. I am here today to request your support, collaboration, and advocacy as we work to open a school-based health center. Kingsman has educated students who struggle in traditional school environments since its founding in 2015. We serve students who are at risk of dropping out of school because they are overage and unaccredited, have attendance problems, or have emotional or behavioral challenges. We have made significant progress in areas of culture, engagement, and academics by adopting evidence-based practices and innovative programming. Despite these and many other successes, Kingsman Academy continues to face challenges in achieving its mission with all students, especially students facing barriers to primary and preventative health. Our most vulnerable students face challenges with access to essential health care. The global pandemic has brought to light the root causes of health disparities for the city's most vulnerable students and families. It has also exposed health inequities across our school systems. As of today, there are 7 school-based community health centers operated by DC Health. All 7 centers are based in DCPS schools, and no school-based health centers are located in Ward 6. In response to the growing need to provide coordinated and comprehensive health services for its students and families, DCPS recently announced the expansion of 15 additional school-based community health centers. As of today, not a single charter school operates a school-based health center in partnership with DC Health. Kingsman Academy is working to be the first, and we need the board support as we navigate uncharted territory with DC Health and other stakeholders. School-based health centers are designed to meet the physical and mental health needs of students, their families, and community members. School-based health centers across the country are working with school leaders to deliver vaccinations, coordinate testing, and offer urgent health services. As a school leader, I'm worried about the health and safety of my students, staff, and families. I'm also worried about the immediate challenges facing our school community and the uncertainty that lies ahead. The District of Columbia is often recognized for its commitment to educate all students. I'm here today to urgently request members of the State Board to work as advocates for equity as we pave the way for school-based health centers at Kingsman Academy. I'm confident that our collective efforts will lead to equitable access to school-based health centers for all of the district's students and families. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Ms. D'Angelo.
Good evening, Executive Director John Paul Hayworth and representatives of the State Board. My name is Nikki D'Angelo, and I'm a Ward 5 resident, DCPS parent, former DC Charter School teacher, and former DCPS Central Office employee. I'm testifying on behalf of Democrats for Education Reform DC, and I'm pleased to offer testimony in support of safe passage. It is my hope that this testimony will provide a critical perspective for keeping our students safe. Now that students are back to school, the issue of safe passage has to be prioritized. As described in the Office of the Students Advocate Survey and report on student safe passage, too many students do not feel safe. I believe that DC must ensure that all students, teachers, and community members are heard so that safe passage policies are specific to each school and community, yet nimble enough to reflect our changing needs. This will require true flexibility, autonomy, and equity in budgeting, and fidelity and accountability in practice. I know there's been a lot of work around safe passage being done by the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Education, and simply there's more that needs to be done. That is why I'm supportive of increased shuttles and safe routes. The last thing students need to worry about is getting safely to school. I've had my own experience with this issue. One day I was walking from the Benning Metro to the school I taught at the time, DC Prep Benning Elementary School, when a car pulled up alongside me just as I crossed Benning Road. He rolled down his window, leaned over from the driver's side, and told me to get in. When I refused, he lunged to grab me and pull me inside the car. I was able to get away and run to my school, but despite my best efforts, I wasn't able to teach for the day, leaving my new second grade class with a last-minute substitute. If this can happen to me in broad daylight, it can happen to anyone. I also know there have been numerous altercations and harassment near Deanwood Metro Station. From my experience teaching at Idea Public Charter School a couple years ago, many of my students successfully used the Safe Passage shuttles already in place to the Dean Metro, yet still frequently reported feeling unsafe walking from the Dean Metro to the school campus. Additionally, there's lots of speeding in Ward 5, especially on our major roads like South Dakota, Rhode Island Avenue, and Blamesburg Road, which bleed into the surrounding residential areas. This concerns me because a lot of students in my neighborhood walk to Langdon Elementary School or Burroughs Elementary School where my son attends. My sincerest gratitude goes to Representative Zachary Parker for his outspokenness and work on this issue in Ward 5, especially considering the 5-year-old who was tragically killed by a vehicle in my neighborhood 2 weeks ago. To reiterate, despite the work that's been done, too many students still struggle with arriving safely to and from school. Each ward has differing problems and thus must have tailored solutions. It is imperative that policymakers center the voices and experiences of community members in order to achieve the best results for our communities. It is my hope that as the school year continues and new information unfolds, the DC State Board of Education will continue to focus its efforts on how to ensure our students are safe coming to and from home and school. Thank you for allowing me to testify.
Thank you very much. Members, we will now move to questions. As I noted earlier, each member has up to 2 minutes for questions. Please use the raise your hand feature and I will call on you in the order that you have raised your hand. Dr. Sutter.
Thank you, Mr. Hayworth. I need to be in transit to a meeting. We'll be on the phone, so I jumped the gun quickly. Mr. Kemp and Ms. Kelly, thank you so much for your testimony on the school-based health center. I want to thank you for your efforts on this and give you both the remainder of my time to share anything else that might be helpful to board members in understanding how we can help advocate for what you're looking to do to serve your students.
Thank you, Jessica. We appreciate that. And thank you for all of your support. I'll be honest and say that we've reached out to several people, and I think there are a few areas where we need support. Most school leaders and even elected officials do not know how school-based health centers are set up. So it's unclear what the process is to become a school-based health center. As I noted in my testimony, currently school-based health centers in partnership with DC Health are only in DCPS schools. So it's a pretty new sort of venture for a charter school to go through this process. I will say that we've had initial conversations with DC health officials and they really want to support us, but no one knows how to navigate next steps. So we will need support in terms of thinking through policies, procedures, and also transparency for this process. So schools like Kingsman Academy are not struggling to set this up, but there's transparency from start to finish. I believe that's the area where we need the most support. I would say the second area of support is around funding. So we are a single site LEA. We are not able to fund this on our own. So we will need the same support that a DCPS school receives in terms of funding from DC Health, but we're not sure how that works. So in terms of the budget timeline and how to make sure that Kingsman Academy is considered in the budget for the next round of school-based health centers is something that we really need support navigating.
Great, thank you so much. I yield the last couple seconds.
Thank you very much. Mr. Patterson.
Thank you, sir. Laura, Ms. Fuchs, thank you for staying on with us because I have a question that kind of comes from Ms. Johnson-Law. In regards to attendance, she mentioned kind of that parents are being penalized for their not wanting to send their kids back to school, various reasons that they're missing school and attendance. I just want to know from you as an educator, as a representative at the WTU, how do you feel that we should go about looking at that and addressing that issue? Because that is a major issue at every school that I've visited thus far.
Yep. I mean, definitely my impression from both my own personal opinion as well as many educators that I talk to is that we don't want attendance rules to be strictly enforced right now, that there should be more flexibility for parents. Most educators I've talked to, in fact, well, all educators I've talked to are in favor of a virtual option for families who want it and believe it should be more robust. There are definitely challenges in creating a robust virtual option when teachers might be called on to simulcast or things like that. And we've not adequately prepared as a system to support teachers in providing a strong virtual choice when students quarantine. Like I was saying, I can put my work up on Canvas, the website we used last year with students, but simulcasting and things like that is not something that I've been offering to my students because I just don't have the technology or the ability really to do that in my classroom for like 2 or 3 kids who might be out on quarantine at any given day. So I think most teachers I know would really support loosening the attendance requirements, knowing that there's just a lot of chaos around the pandemic, and increasing parents' choices, including a virtual option for parents who want it.
Thank you for your response.
Thank you very much. Dr. O'Leary.
This has been very interesting testimony. I'm not going to ask Laura anything. We were talking about everything that she was talking about yesterday at the council hearing. I'd like to ask Ms. Baum, is there any chance of the system altering the standardized testing in your view? And I need a short answer.
No, I don't think so, unfortunately.
Because that's one of the biggest problems with the star rating for me, and it always has been. We need to really, really lift our voices about standardized testing. The references you gave are not the only ones. There aren't too many teachers who feel standardized testing is worth much at all. I'd also like to thank Ms. Law for her testimony and to talk about I don't have time to talk. Thank you, Ms. Law. And for the people at Kingsman, I just have one question. You can't get money from DCPS or from the city to get a health center at your school according to the way the charters are set up, right?
We're advocating for equitable funding for equitable access. And the funding that DCPS schools receive for school-based health centers is from DC Health. And DC Health supports all schools, not just DCPS schools. But there's just an inequity issue right now around the allocation of the school-based health center as a resource.
Thank you for bringing that up. It won't be the last time that the public hears about this from me. I guarantee you that. Thank you.
Thank you. We really appreciate it.
Dr. Reid.
Okay, Ms. Law, I do have time. So 2 questions. One, you listed a number of special education things that have been overlooked, and that leads to a question of compensatory education. And having been in special education space, sometimes that looks a variety of ways. How can we do compensatory education in a meaningful way? And then the second piece of it is, hearing you frequently between yesterday's hearing and a couple other hearings and meetings, you mentioned a lot about what this system can do together and what are those elements of planning together around COVID.
Thank you, Dr. Reid. So the first around comp education. So, right, like maybe like at-home tutors, or if you virtual tutoring, or going like in-person tutoring, even if it's like to an outside source, or even if the school can maybe offer it or bring somebody in. I also think there may have to be a conversation around like related services. And again, like trying to maybe find another practitioner to come in to help with those services, because it's just, again, it's sped time and it's related service time, right? So, and just, again, in a meaningful way, just again, like in-home tutors, virtual tutors, in-person tutors, just giving parents options. And to the other point about COVID, we need but we have to realize that like one household can have so many kids in so many different places, right? So I'm going to include childcare, I'm including charters, and I'm including DCPS, right? We had middle schoolers at Lucky shut down. How many of them have siblings? Where do they go? This is a parent choice town. Where do your kids go? They go everywhere. So if we're not going to have a coordinated response to COVID and contact tracing and testing and quarantining rules, everyone should be operating on the same wavelength. And if we're not, we're just going to keep having chaos, which is why it has to be a united front. I'm sorry, I left you for a second.
Nope, you're the only question I had. I'm done.
Thank you, Dr. Reid. Ms. Thompson.
Good evening. So I actually would like to pick up where Dr. Reid was left off. I know everybody doesn't have the benefit of the chat who is watching the meeting. And Ms. Johnson-Law, I'd just like you to share a little bit of what you wrote in the chat in regards to special education and some of the concerns you're seeing.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Thompson. So it's a couple things, and the things that I'm about to say, some of them are happening at the same time. For example, students with special education, if you're being quarantined, right, you're getting a packet, so you're not getting any instruction. Then there comes into a play of transportation. So OSSI transportation, okay, you're quarantined. So when is the bus coming? The school told me not to come get you this day. And now we're missing even more time. The school is blaming transportation. Transportation is blaming the school. And now this IEP or 504 isn't being implemented at all. And we're having more time. So that's another issue that's happening at the same time. Two, I just think we really need to be a support to our schools. I think our schools are so stretched thin that they really need special education support. And then we have a multitude of students who may need evaluations, right? So we're just dealing with all of these different issues. And honestly, I think we should give our schools mandated special education training, especially in light of COVID, because maybe schools don't realize, hey, the federal law didn't go anywhere, it didn't waive, and maybe they just need support. So instead of like blaming schools or just completely filing state complaints or what's the other one? Lord, I'm so tired, y'all. The other one, so state complaints or the other one, it's we're giving them support before it even gets to that level, and now families are calling AJE for help.
I want to reserve my last 20 seconds to thank Laura, because Laura keeps showing up in all the places, and she always does, and tells us the truth. And so I don't have a question because I know where you're coming from. But I just want to say that I appreciate, how that everything. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you very much. Mr. O'Sullivan.
Thank you, John Paul, and thank you to everyone who's here. I think it's really valuable that each of you all came and shared your perspectives on a number of different issues, and I think that just demonstrates how many different issues as a city, as an education city we're facing right now. And I want to thank Ms. D'Angelo for your comments about safe passage. I know before this we had a hearing and we heard similar things about the importance of it and looking at the cohesiveness in terms of what we're doing, especially with COVID. And then also Mr. Kemp and Ms. Kelly, I really appreciate what you guys are doing. I personally had never heard of a school-based health center before your guys' presentation today. And this is something I'm definitely gonna pass along to the Student Advisory Committee to let them know what it is and let them know that it is an opportunity. So I really appreciate that. And if you guys wanted to put your emails in the chat so I could follow up with you guys, that would be greatly appreciated. And then obviously Ms. Fuchs and Ms. Baum, you guys are both sharing really important messages, I think, about the way things are working right now, because I think we can overlook some of the concerns people are having. Ms. Fuchs, I know the concerns you have, it's something that I feel like every student in our city has internalized at this point, that social distancing in a school is probably, at least from my experience for high schools, it's not a real thing. Like, we can say it is, but like in the hallways, it's terrible. Outside, going into the school building, it's terrible. In classrooms, it's not a thing. And then I also want to say, Ms. Johnson-Law, I really appreciate what you had to share. And I think overall, virtual learning and special education right now, it's something that really needs to be talked about. And it's something that's being overlooked. And I'm hoping in the future, maybe next month, the board could have a panel or a hearing on those manners like you suggested, because it's something that needs to be discussed. So thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Ms. Wattenberg. Ms. Wattenberg?
Yeah, sorry. So I want to start by thanking a few people and actually following up on what Mr. O'Sullivan said. I really appreciated hearing from Ms. Law about the special ed issues under COVID. We started that conversation, gosh, a long time ago, 14 months ago. We followed up at one point, but I think it is time to really hear about that. So I second the idea that we should have a session on that. I also really appreciate the folks coming from Kingsman. I'm also very interested in this issue of the health centers and the related question of the connected schools, which is a DCPS, I think it's DCPS community wraparound services. So I think it would be great for us all to have sort of some sense of what these different models are, how they're funded, to what extent it comes through UPSF, to what extent it comes from elsewhere. So I am all for that. And thanks to all the rest of you, and I'm going to focus my question to Ms. Baum. You talked about the problem with having ratings, and whether it's of schools or of teachers that are based on standardized tests, and that it encourages poor practices. So I want to ask, here's my question. If we move away from a rating, we'll still report the standardized test scores. Everybody doesn't understand that. It's still going to be very transparent. That's the federal law. But what else should we be reporting so that people fully understand other aspects of quality? If they want to know are the kids learning? What should we look at?
I think there's a lot of research that's been done around surveys. I think looking at teacher retention is really important. Are teachers staying at the school? What does parent involvement look like? What's the data around that at schools? All of these other indicators that are part of indicating children's academic success, like special ed services, ratios, those types of things are really important.
Thank you very much. Dr. Gasoi.
Thank you so much. And I have so many questions for all of you. I just want you to know that I can't ask them all, but I really want to thank you all for your testimony. And I think for most of you, the state board really is working on a lot of the issues that you are raising. So we are hearing you, and we are also hearing from a lot of other stakeholders that are saying similar things. I am going to direct my question, I guess, to the teachers first on the panel. Thank you for all that you're doing right now. I guess I'm hearing from Ms. Johnson-Law that, her child is not receiving any work when she's in quarantine. And then Ms. Fuchs, I heard you say that you are putting work up online. And I guess, also to Ms. Baum, if you want to answer this, just, is there any messaging around what should happen when students are in quarantine? What are you expected to do around work? Or are you just doing it yourself? Ms. Fuchs, do you want to start?
Well, yeah, there's not really any centralized messaging. And like, we're now getting dinged apparently for people who didn't put up Canvas pages because they didn't tell us to do that. I just did it because that was the way I could think to get students work who were out the very first day quarantined. But yeah, there's no real communication. There's no real expectations. And again, I'm not being told who's under quarantine. So when a kid doesn't show up one day, I don't know that it's because of quarantine. I maybe could just be there out that day and they'll be back the next day. I don't know. So there's not enough communication. They're not telling us anything, at least at the secondary level, probably same in elementary, like who's out and why. And so I don't actually know who to give a 10-day packet to. Or, I mean, I don't do packets, but I don't even know who to be preparing work for, especially.
I can't believe my time went so quickly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. President Parker.
Yes, thank you all for being here. Really moving testimony. Ms. Fuchs, I want to pick up where you just left off. Yesterday, I recall Councilmember Henderson asking about how absences are coded and whether or not we as a city will be able to track that at a later point in time. And so what I'm now hearing you say is, as a teacher, you don't even know if a student is being quarantined. And so how are you currently coding attendance if a student is missing?
Well, so, I mean, no, they're going to be mad at me for this, but like, we had a huge fight this past week at my school about this exact issue because nothing was getting reported. As of like last week, we'd had one reported case and we knew that wasn't true as educators. And so we had to have a big fight with administration. We found out someone hadn't been filling in a certain form. And like the fact that it's that simple, that like one person could clog up the whole system and then nothing was getting through, like that's a big problem. Like DCPS is not doing enough to make these systems actually work because they weren't working. And like still there's a lot of miscommunication over what they should be coding and how they should be coding it. And frankly, it feels like they're trying to suppress the numbers that are officially coded as quarantine and just mark them as absent excused. That's how it feels on our end. I can't speak 100% for it.
Yeah, no, thank you. We will reach out just to try to get more understanding around that, whether this is a specific incident, which it seems doubtful, or whether or not there's someone else changing the coding, but that just really piqued my interest. Ms. Law, as always, I really appreciate your testimony. I'll give you my last 10 seconds to just continuing to elevate anything around special education that you think we should be acting on. 5 seconds.
I just saw a bell, and so hopefully OSSI will go to you guys so you can have oversight over it so it can get done. And I yield.
That was a mic drop moment, and thank you. Thank you all. Truly, truly, I appreciate you all sharing your testimony. And I know I'm going over time. This is no longer my question part, but I just want you to know that as a body, as a board, we do hear you. We are pushing. We are behind the scenes working to get answers, collaborating. And I would just elevate Representative Reid, if you could also drop in the chat, or staff, someone, not to put you on the spot, but our report form, for the lack of a better term, if there are instances that you are hearing of issues at a school or parents are running into issues, please notify us, because that would allow us to elevate it to council, to run it up the chain at OSSI to really get answers for you all. So we'll be sure to push that out, but I also just wanted to elevate that again. And thank you all for coming tonight. I believe that is the end of our public testimony. We will now move to the voting portion. And for members of the public, we will post that form again on our social media pages. But it is the constituent feedback form. Representative Reid, who is chairing the Advocacy and Outreach Committee, will be the point person for that. Again, we ask that if you run into any issues at your school or you hear of concerns from other parents, educators, please let us know so that we can track those incidents and identify trends across the city. Members.
Zachary, could I make a suggestion that everyone put their email and their phone number in the chat? Or does that matter? Is the chat just public to us?
Yeah, this chat is just for us.
Okay,
on the
okay.
YouTube page, the public can see that. So we can put our emails there if you think it would be helpful. Mr. Hayworth, if staff could help us put member emails on the YouTube page in case folk, or if maybe the link to the contact page so folk could reach out, that too could be helpful. Representative Wattenberg.
I just wanted to say, for those who don't know, our official emails are first name dot last name at dc.gov. So I'm Ruth.Wattenberg at dc.gov. So that's one way to do it.
Awesome. Great. We will begin our votes tonight with a ceremonial resolution recognizing the 20th anniversary of September 11th, or the September 11, 2001 terrorist attack that killed nearly 3,000 people, including district students Bernard Brown, Rodney Dickens, Asia Cotton, teachers Hilda Taylor, James Deborah Neuer, and Sarah Clark, and the National Geographic staff members and Judge and Joe Ferguson, who were on American Airlines Flight 77. Is there a motion on this resolution?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Hayworth, may you please read the resolution into the record?
State Board of Education ceremonial resolution commemorating the 20th anniversary of September 11th, 2001, CR 21-16. Whereas on September 11th, 2001, the United States suffered a violent terrorist attack leading to the tragic deaths and injuries of thousands of innocent United States citizens and other citizens from more than 90 different nations and territories. Whereas 2 coordinated hijacked planes crashed into both the north and south towers of the World Trade Center. A 3rd hijacked plane with some of our students, teachers, and staff on board crashed into the Pentagon. And a 4th hijacked plane crashed into an open field in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, after passengers and crew fought to regain control of the aircraft that was on course for Washington, D.C. Whereas the D.C. State Board of Education honors the 20th anniversary of September 11th, 2001 for our students Bernard Brown, Rodney Dickens, and Asia Cotton, and teachers Hilda Taylor, James Deveneur, and Sarah Clark, and National Geographic staff members Ann Judge and Joe Ferguson, who are on American Airlines Flight 77. Whereas acts of terrorism, racism, intolerance, and hatred are born of ignorance. Whereas the DC State Board of Education established the Day of Remembrance resolution in 2001 to honor the lives lost on September 11th, while reflecting on pivotal changes that arose from the tragedy and recognizing important themes and issues such as peace, racism, intolerance, and hatred through standards-based curricula. Whereas commemorating September 11th, 2001 spotlights the larger world community that the United States is interconnected with and the sense of powerlessness and vulnerability that many Americans felt in the aftermath. Whereas although the nation came together under a remarkable spirit of service and compassion, there was an influx of hate attacks against the South Asian community, especially those who are Sikh. Whereas we call for peace, unity, and compassion among all communities, regardless of race, ethnicity, age, disability, gender, religion, and sexual orientation. Whereas it is the responsibility of the DC State Board of Education to help the community understand other cultural experiences and perspectives, as well as prepare students for their roles as future world citizens and leaders. Whereas it is an imperative that schools in the district, many of which are demographically diverse, should use the Day of Remembrance to talk about the importance of unity and diversity. Whereas the commemoration of the 20th anniversary serves as a time for everyone to unite not just locally, but on the national and international level, and elevate the premise that the world can be changed for the better. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the State Board of Education honors the 20th anniversary of September 11th, 2001 for our students, teachers, and staff members who lost their lives that day. Be it further resolved that all district schools will observe this day each year by teaching from a curricula designed to address issues related to eliminating racism, intolerance, and hatred, and promoting peace. Be it further resolved that the DC State Board of Education recognizes and honors the 20th anniversary of the establishment of September 11th, Day of Remembrance, and the lives that were lost on that day.
Thank you. Is there a discussion? Representative Wattenberg.
Oh, no.
Oh, Representative Reid.
I'm glad. I know the timing is different because of our meeting time move, but still highly relevant. And just raising the fact that 2 or several lives lost were attached to Ward 8 schools, with Ketchum Elementary School and Leckie Elementary School. I believe I got the right names. Students take an opportunity to see something different and going on a field trip. I also appreciate that our ward schools continue to raise these stories. I know Hart Middle School posted the parents of one of the students from Ward 8 and having them tell their story to the middle schoolers who I believe now, I'm bad with math, we have a generation who weren't present when 9/11 happened, where a lot of us on this call distinctly remember that event. So I'm proud that our schools are continuing to lift, those stories and give students opportunity to demonstrate lessons learned and see that Washingtonians were involved in the events but then also the fight to basically change some things in the world. So I appreciate the resolution. I also learned a lot, not just about the lives lost at the schools, but also just the Washingtonians who participated in the subsequent war and also lost their lives. So I appreciate this board for taking that up.
Thank you. Representative Patterson.
What Dr. Reid has said, I remember that day quite well. I had just left the military as active duty the month before and was called back to active duty to respond to the Pentagon as a chaplain assistant to the first responders and who went through that, and the heroism from our first responders and the people from DC who just really did all that they could. And also, as you said, Dr. Reid, the students that were lost, that were merely trying to go on a field trip, I believe, to the Smithsonian or something to that extent, something out in California that was out there. And it was just a very difficult day, specifically for our city, knowing that what had happened and what was targeted. So I really appreciate this resolution as a military member, as a Ward 8 resident, and as a DC resident. Thank you for putting this forward in the time.
Seeing no other discussion, we shall vote. Mr. Hayworth, please call the roll.
Dr. Gasoi.
Aye.
Mr. Chang. Ms. Wattenberg.
Aye.
Dr. O'Leary.
Emphatically aye.
Dr. Sutter. Ms. Thompson.
Aye.
Dr. Reid.
Aye.
Mr. Patterson.
Emphatically aye, as Mr. O'Leary said.
Mr. O'Sullivan.
Aye.
Ms. Lopez.
Aye.
President Parker.
Aye.
The resolution is approved.
Members, we also have a ceremonial resolution recognizing National Hispanic Heritage Month. Is there a motion on this resolution?
So moved.
Is there a second?
C.
Being properly moved and seconded, Mr. Hayworth, can you read the resolution into the record?
Mr. President, I actually would like Ms. Lopez to read the record and to read the resolution in Spanish, if that is appropriate.
Oh, great.
Good.
Ms. Lopez, I believe you're on mute.
Okay, thank you. Resolución ceremonial de la Junta de Educación del Estado celebrando el Mes Nacional de la Herencia Hispana, CR 21-17. Considerando que los Estados Unidos observa el Mes Nacional de la Herencia Hispana cada año, desde el 15 de septiembre hasta el 15 de octubre, continuando una tradición que comenzó en 1968 bajo el presidente Lyndon B. Johnson como la Semana de Herencia Hispana y que fue ampliada por el presidente Ronald Reagan en 1988. Considerando que el propósito del Mes Nacional de la Herencia Hispana es celebrar el idioma, la cultura, las contribuciones y la historia de las comunidades hispana y latinx de los Estados Unidos que representan ascendencia de España, África, México, el Caribe, América Central y América del Sur. Considerando que el Mes de la Herencia Hispana también reconoce el aniversario de la independencia de varios países latinoamericanos, entre ellos Chile, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, México y Nicaragua. Considerando que más de 67.900 residentes del Distrito de Columbia son de ascendencia hispana o latinx, según las estimaciones más recientes de la Oficina del Censo de los Estados Unidos. Considerando que casi 19.900 de los estudiantes del distrito se identifican como hispanos o latinos y considerando que este año se conmemorará el Mes Nacional de la Herencia Hispana en las escuelas y vecindarios del distrito con eventos, festivales, programas y actividades virtuales, y socialmente distanciados. Por lo tanto, se resuelve ahora que la Junta de Educación del Estado de D.C. reconozca y celebre el Mes Nacional de la Herencia Hispana y los logros, contribuciones y existencia de los residentes del Distrito de Ascendencia Hispana y Latina. Y se resuelve además que la Junta Estatal reconozca y valore la importancia de la pedagogía culturalmente sostenible, los programas de inmersión en 2 idiomas y los métodos de instrucción bilingües como elementos importantes de la equidad y la excelencia en educación.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Members, is there discussion on the resolution? Representative O'Sullivan.
That was just a clapping emoji, but I can go ahead anyways. I just want to say great job, Representative Lopez, and thank you for being here. And it's been so nice to work with you already in the past couple of weeks. And I'm so glad that the board is honoring Hispanic Heritage Month. And I'm really happy we're taking up this cause. And I'd just like to thank all the contributions that Hispanic Americans have made to our country, but just in general, what diversity does, what diversity and inclusion does for our country. Even the people who aren't famous, even the people whose names we don't hear, their contribution and what they do for our country matters just as much. So thank you. And again, I'm very happy the board is taking up a resolution on this.
Thank you. Vice President Gasoi.
Thank you. Everything that Representative O'Sullivan just said, I echo 100%. So glad that you are now one of our reps, Representative Lopez, and that was, I'm getting emotional, like that made me emotional. So just thank you. I just want to say, you know, everything that Representative O'Sullivan said about, you know, I feel really proud that we are introducing this resolution that recognizes the contributions of Hispanic, Latino, Latinx residents across the city. But I do just want to recognize that, you know, for Ward 1 and Ward 4, if this is a especially relevant resolution. And I just want to also express my pride in the work that the State Board has done to address the gaps in our Latino, Latinx student population and the teachers who they are able to see themselves in. And I also want to recognize that there are still a lot of families and children waiting at the border to come in to gain asylum. I want to recognize all of the schools, again, many of them in Ward 1 and Ward 4 who welcome students all through the year who are coming into our country. Many of them are unaccompanied minors. So, you know, in particular, I just want to give a shout out to Cardozo Education Campus and their International Education Academy and Czech. But all of our elementary schools, especially the dual language programs, really take in students all throughout the year who are coming in from the border. So I'm just very, as you can see, a little emotional and excited to pass this or vote on this resolution tonight.
Thank you. Representative Reid.
I have to thank Representative Gasoi for leading the work with our Latino and Latinx educators. And also raising the point that you just raised about our unaccompanied minors. I know DC is participating in the program to help facilitate have families to help facilitate some of that connection for our students. I know you're not supposed to really talk about work in this, but I just really want to hone on that. It's so real. I had my supervisor did a detail for students or young people who are unaccompanied, and just the stories and conditions is something that our country just should not lose, fall off the radar, and should just be really mindful of. So you have all right to be feeling emotional about that. To our newest student rep, Juliana, you made me dust off my little bit of Spanish, and I just think it's something really in regards to, just the beauty of language. And I think if I can get it right, you said dual instrucciones in idiomas, probably butchered that, but dual language instruction. Just trying to listen and hear your testimony or hear you interpret the resolution for folks is something. Definitely thinking about access to dual language programs, and it has me thinking about taking a survey of our Ward 8 schools to see how many offer, because I think language is a great way of uniting us in understanding of one another and understanding of one another's culture, just us as people. So that's something that I would like to look into, and I appreciate you this evening for presenting that resolution.
Thank you. Representative O'Leary.
I'm going to speak from my experience at Cardozo and my experience with the Ward 4 schools. I can remember when Hispanic Heritage Week was celebrated in the city. And I can remember when Cardozo was almost all African American. And then when the war started in El Salvador, that's when the first influx of people came to the United States who were Spanish speaking. And Cardozo is now 50-50, I would think, Latino and African American. And the Hispanic Heritage Month celebrations are now more than like 4 or 5 people on the stage. So that we need to make sure that we don't take our thumb off of the button, because the fact that our schools don't have security personnel who speak Spanish, don't have police who help in the school, or the police department doesn't have that many Spanish-speaking officers, and that we don't have, even though we're working on it with the board, we don't have a lot of teachers who are Spanish-speaking teaching subjects other than Spanish. And we need to make sure that our audience, our school staff represents our audience. So we've got plenty of work to do to make sure that every year Hispanic Heritage Month reflects our city.
Thank you.
Thank you, Juliana.
Representative Thompson.
I'll be brief. I just want to say I am always thrilled to hear from our student reps. I just think they are so valuable. That's all I got. I think it's important to say that every time. And so thank you. Thank you all. You're awesome.
And I will just, Representative Lopez.
Yes, I just wanted to express that I feel grateful. I feel, it makes me feel very elated to just see that the recognition that Hispanic Heritage Month now gets. Like Miss Representative Reid said, language is very important. It just unites us in a way that, sometimes you can't see it. And it feels amazing to see the resolution and hearing everyone's kind words. And yes, we do have, some work to do to get everyone together, but that's something that we'll do together as we go along our way, and we'll get there. We'll get there. I'm sure that we will. Thank you.
No, thank you. I would echo what has already been said. Representative Lopez, thank you to all of our student representatives, but especially regarding this resolution, just what your presence here at the State Board represents and means for us, and also the work that has been done over the last few years, especially to make sure that this body and this board is reflective of all of the students, or at least more of the students that we serve. Should not go unnoticed. And there's still more work to do. I just recall not too long ago at the beginning of the school year, as I was going around visiting schools, there was a mom and her daughter, and the mom had a language barrier with the school personnel. So that is why, Representative O'Leary, what you said really resonated with me. And it was the student that was forced to have to translate for her mom so that she could help register the student in school. And so I just offer that to say that while there are many things for us to focus on, there is still much more work that we need to do to ensure that we as a city can embrace all of our students and the very basic ways of language to make sure that we all have access, or they all have access rather. But really honored and thrilled that this body has taken up this resolution to recognize the rich history of our Latino brothers and sisters. So with that, Mr. Hayworth, if you could please call the roll.
Dr. Gasoi.
Enthusiastic aye.
Ms. Wattenberg.
Abstain.
Dr. O'Leary.
What Ms. Gasoi said.
Dr. Sutter.
Sí, por supuesto.
Ms. Thompson.
Aye.
Aye.
Dr. Reid.
Aye.
Mr. Patterson.
Aye.
Mr. O'Sullivan.
Aye.
Ms. Lopez.
Claro que sí.
President Parker.
Aye.
The resolution is adopted.
All right, members, just give me 1 second. I'm afraid I may have missed a resolution, but I don't think I did. Our next resolution recognizes African Heritage Month. Is there a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the resolution for African Heritage Month.
Is there a second?
Second.
Being properly moved and seconded. Mr. Hayworth, can you please read the resolution into the record?
State Board of Education Ceremonial Resolution celebrating African Heritage Month, CR 21-18. Whereas the District of Columbia observes the inaugural African Heritage Month this year from September 1st to September 30, marking a tradition that will acknowledge, celebrate, and uplift the cultural, ethnic, and linguistic diversity of the district's African community. Whereas the purpose of African Heritage Month is to acknowledge and celebrate the languages, cultures, contributions, and histories of the African community in the district, who represent the diaspora of 54 countries and over 1,500 languages. Whereas more than 16,000 District of Columbia residents are of African heritage, according to the most recent estimates from the United States Census Bureau. Whereas the District of Columbia is the only municipality in the nation with an Office of African Affairs dedicated to serving the African community. And whereas African Heritage Month will be commemorated this year in district neighborhoods with socially distanced and virtual events, festivals, programs, and activities. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education recognizes and celebrates African Heritage Month and the achievements, contributions, and existence of the district's residents of African ancestry. And be it further resolved that the State Board recognizes and values the importance of culturally sustaining pedagogy, culturally responsive programs, and equitable methods of instruction as important elements of excellence in education.
Thank you. Members, is there a discussion? Representative O'Leary.
Yes, what I was saying about Latino students goes for the same at Cardozo, but also for Ward 4. And I would question the number 16,000 as an accurate account for the number of people who are of African descent, because I know in Ward 4, we have a significant Ethiopian population, probably the single most population from African countries. And I just can't, that number seems awfully small to me. But you know, I'm not questioning us. I just wonder about that. This is so important that we recognize the diversity of this city, and that we did not just recognize it. Okay, you got your month or your whatever. We have to be active about making sure that everyone is recognized and taken care of by the city.
Thank you, Representative O'Leary. Representative Reid.
I am really enjoying our ceremonial resolutions tonight, I must say. But yeah, ditto what Frazier, Representative O'Leary said. And I just have to kind of, the resolution spoke on like just culturally responsiveness and values, and having visited and wanting to visit more, but I think I'm at 4 African countries and seeing the diversity, but one common thread is the deep values around education. It's greatly kind of appreciated to see and feel. And I often get a little jealous because I wish that those values would translate into how we do schooling, how we value schooling. So yes, lots of things to learn from the continent, so.
Thank you. Representative Thompson.
So I would be remiss if I just didn't acknowledge that we actually have a bunch of diversity across the city. I feel like we talk a lot about, and nothing to take away from Ward 1 or Ward 4. And, you know, I thoroughly miss a lot of the, especially Ethiopian establishments that I grew up with in that part of the city that no longer can afford to be there. But like my first friend at Plummer School was El Salvadorian. And she's actually the reason that I studied Spanish all the way through college. Or like, I'm thrilled that we now have dual language programs in Ward 7. I think that's important. I think it's important to be able to show kids just a bigger world. I think about my own sister who supposedly speaks French. I say that because I don't speak French, I speak Spanish. And she, you know, graduated from DCI this past year. And just their ability to be able to converse with people who look like them from African cultures is amazing. And so I want to just remind us that like there's diversity across the city, and it makes us beautiful. It makes us stronger. It's not only in like certain pockets. And so even if you're the only neighbor on your street, or whether you live in an entire El Salvadorian 2 apartment buildings that have been there for I'm not going to tell you how long of my life, but we have that all the way throughout, and I'm grateful for it as a resident.
Thank you. Members, I'm not seeing other comments. I would just say there was a question asked once around the purpose of us passing ceremonial resolutions, and it's not lost on me. How do I put this? It's not lost on me the change we've seen in the leadership and representation of this country over just the last few months. And so it makes me especially proud when we as a body go on the record to celebrate the richness, the diversity, the value of all types of communities that represent not only this city, but what makes this country so great. And I just want to shout out the work that this body is doing around our social studies standards. These ceremonial resolutions tie a direct thread to the values that are embodied in the revisions that we're proposing, that simply say all of our students have a place in history and their narratives are just as valuable to be told. So thrilled to be voting on this resolution with all the others. And thank you all for your comments tonight. So Mr. Hayworth, if you can please call the roll.
Dr. Gasoi.
Aye.
Ms. Wattenberg. Dr. O'Leary.
Aye.
Ms. Thompson.
Aye.
Dr. Reid.
Aye.
Oh, Rep. Sutter? No?
Dr. Sutter has had to log off the meeting, and so Mr. Patterson.
Aye.
Mr. O'Sullivan.
Aye.
Lopez.
Aye.
President Parker.
Aye.
The resolution is approved.
Awesome. Members, one of the primary responsibilities of being an elected State Board of Education representative is to serve as a conduit for the views of district residents. We do this in our meetings here at the State Board, testifying before council and by serving on external committees. And today we will be confirming the appointment of State Board representatives as members of external committees where they will represent the State Board and district residents. And so with that, is there a motion on the resolution dictating external appointments?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Being properly moved and seconded. I'm going to forego us naming all of the appointments. Members have the access as well as to the materials as well as members of the public. And so, Mr. Hayworth, if you can call the roll.
Dr. Gasoi.
Aye.
Ms. Wattenberg. Dr. O'Leary.
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Thompson.
Aye.
Dr. Reid.
Aye.
Mr. Patterson.
Aye.
Mr. O'Sullivan.
Aye.
Ms. Lopez.
Aye.
President Parker.
Aye.
The resolution is approved.
Thank you. Members, I'm just realizing that I missed the to tee up discussion. And so I know we've already voted, but did anyone want to make a point of comment around the appointments or the resolution? And my apologies for that. Vice President Gasoi.
Just really quickly want to thank members who are serving on external bodies because, you know, it's your time and we appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you. Representative Thompson.
Since we didn't read the resolution into the record, where do people know where to find the appointments? Can we state that for the public?
I believe we're posting it on social media, but also members can find it on our assembly, which is where all of our meeting materials are housed. That's on our website, but we can also push that out on social media for the public to see. And we also included, I know when we do our press releases for our meetings, we push it out through email as well. But a point that I know you've made before, Representative Thompson, is that everybody's not on social media and everyone is not receiving our emails. And so that point has stuck with me. And so we're continuing to think about how do we expand our reach about the meetings, about materials, and what we're voting on. So we will get there. All right. I believe that is it for our ceremonial resolutions. Awesome. In August, Mayor Bowser announced she would require all district employees, contractors, and fellows to be vaccinated with exemptions for medical or religious reasons. The state board, as an independent agency, did not fall under that order, but we recognize the importance of vaccination. Today, we will consider adopting a policy that will require vaccination against COVID-19 for all representatives, staff, fellows, and interns. I would note for representatives and the public that the draft policy has been reviewed for legality and by the DC Department of Human Relations for implementation. I just would also just stress that it is just very important that more of us emphasize the importance of being vaccinated so that more of our students can get back into schools where they belong and to do so safely. So with that, is there a motion on this?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And this would, we're going to open it up for discussion, but this would apply to the state board, the office of the student advocate, and the office of the ombudsman, just to be clear. So with that, members, please raise your hand if you would like to add comment. Representative O'Leary.
We're not covered under the mayor's thing she put out on Monday.
We are not, as an independent agency. We are not covered under the orders that regarding
even though we're going to be going into school buildings and everything like that.
My understanding would be, given that the DCPS policy, for instance, is that all individuals be vaccinated. That may preclude members from entering should you not be vaccinated, but that is something we would have to look into.
I'm not against the vaccination policy. In
no,
fact,
I know.
The FDA just came out with okaying the Pfizer vaccine for senior citizens. So, you know, you can shoot me up. It's fine with me. But I think that we should. I'm all for this.
Yeah. I mean, the real reason is because of our independence, and so we have to enact our own policy.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, Representative O'Sullivan.
Thank you, President Parker. I'm glad we're taking this up, and I'm hoping we can set a good model as a board, being fully vaccinated and coming out and sharing that. And also, I think it's going to be important for a broader discussion, especially as 5 through 11-year-olds, as they become able to get the vaccine. I think it's going to be an important issue for us because I think whenever that is approved, we will probably get a lot of public testimony talking about, maybe from teachers about how they want their students to get vaccinated. And if they're not, they may not feel totally comfortable. And I think it's going to be important for us as a board to try to think about efforts. And I know Representative Sutter, we've had some preliminary talks to other student reps about ways we can take this on as a group, but I think it would be great as a collective board, and then also with the student representatives, how we really can encourage DC students to get the vaccine, especially those younger students, because I'm not entirely sure the breakdown for COVID cases in schools in the city, but they're the ones who can't get vaccinated right now. And so it really is important that they do get vaccinated. And a big part of that is going to be getting through with the parents about why their child should get vaccinated and making sure they know that it's safe. So I think this is going to be an issue that's going to be important in the next couple months. So it's very timely that we are passing this.
Thank you. Representative Thompson.
I have first a question, then a comment. So my question is, does this apply to our student reps as well, or is it just the old reps, the adult reps?
It is my understanding it does not apply to our student reps because they would still be under their parents' jurisdiction.
Okay, that's helpful. Second, for Representative O'Leary, we do not count as regular volunteers. The mayor's guidance was that regular volunteers were supposed to have COVID, not necessarily like if you just want to enter a building. So I went, so yeah, so that is probably helpful. I mean, I generally think this is a good thing, and this is a small body. I do think it's important for us to lead by example. I feel like if I had to get a TB test for all these years to volunteer in schools and shots for TB and nobody's died from TB, the least I can do as a representative is do my part and get the COVID vaccine. So I appreciating us standing in solidarity with what our school colleagues on the ground have to do. And so I'm supportive of the resolution.
Thank you. Representative Wattenberg.
Yeah, so I agree with the great spirit here about how we should be a model and demonstrate it and be in solidarity with the folks in our other education institutions, which all have to have vaccines. I want to ask a question. I'm sorry, I did not notice this until just now, but among the exemptions we have is C, that if people want to test out instead of getting vaccinated, we're allowing that according to this policy, which is now not the case with DC employees or DCPS employees. And I'm really not sure why we want to have that. I mean, the tradition is changing, the culture is changing on that. So I could offer an amendment, but I wondered if there was a special reason that we had that at this point.
Based on discussions between our three offices, that was where we landed. I'm happy to, the only thing that gives me pause about that or that friendly amendment is that I would want to align with our sister offices, given that this would apply with them, which might mean we would table this vote. I'm not saying we don't do that, but I'm just saying I would want us to align.
That's fine. Also, what I would say is I certainly understand that we can't do it without talking to them, and I don't want to delay the vote. But what I would like, and I'd like to just sort of see some maybe heads nodding or something, is that we could come back to this in October and amend it, assuming that there's no reason not to.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And I see Representative Reid's point also that it's gone through the legal review. So I agree we should do all that, the good faith appropriate process, and then come back to it so that we're in line with the other agencies.
I think that's a great idea. Awesome. Thank you. I'm not seeing any other points of discussion. I just would, for the public, reiterate the reason why we're continuing to meet virtually. And that is for several reasons, primarily for the public's health. This body, as signaled with this vote, is prioritizing obviously for public testimony. It is challenging to get large numbers of people together, given the variants that are out there, although we are still working to do that. And we think it is more important to make sure that parents and educators are heard and can access us in this moment. And so staff is working overtime to find a safe venue, one that has ample circulation, perhaps one that is semi-outdoors and indoors to allow for the public to gather. Also, the chambers that the state board normally meets in is being used by the executive for their regular meetings. And so I just wanted to offer that, that this is one of the many steps that this body is taking to keep members safe, but also is one of many steps that we're taking to get back to fully meeting in person. And with that, Mr. Hayworth, if you could please call the roll.
Zach, can I mention one thing?
Yes, Representative O'Leary.
Just for the public, we have never met live this particular State Board of Education, and we're getting up to be a year old as a State Board of Education, and we've never met live, all of us together, and we miss being live.
Absolutely. Representative Wattenberg.
Yeah, the one other point I wanted to make, because I don't think you made it unless I missed it, is the other thing we want to be able to do is to be able to come back and simultaneously be in person, because to Representative O'Leary's point, that's really nice, and we get to see each other, and we also like to see people, our constituents and stakeholders coming to testify. But we also know that there's a huge number of people for whom it's been much, much easier to participate virtually. And we don't want to lose that. We don't want to lose hearing their voice. We don't want to lose them to lose their opportunity to testify. So that's the other thing we're really trying to piece together here is how to, it's partly the safety, it's also partly how to be simultaneous.
Good point. Yes. And we are working to hopefully sometime this fall to reconvene in that hybrid fashion. And so we will be sure to update the public with more information. Mr. Hayworth, if you can please call the roll.
Dr. Gasoi.
Aye.
Ms. Wattenberg.
Aye.
Dr. O'Leary.
Aye.
Ms. Thompson.
Aye.
Dr. Reid. Mr. Patterson.
Aye.
Mr. O'Sullivan.
Aye.
Ms. Lopez.
Aye.
President Parker.
Aye.
The policy is approved.
Great. Thank you, members. We are now going to move to the new business portion of our meeting. Are there points of new business that members would like to offer at this time? Representative Wattenberg.
No, I'm sorry, that's not current.
Representative Thompson.
I'm not completely sure if this qualifies as new business, given it was brought up at a previous meeting. I recall, and I'm sorry, maybe because it's after 8 o'clock, but I can't recall if it was a working session or a public meeting where we talked about the fall engagements, the community meetings, and that we didn't have a vendor bid. I'm still a little unclear if that's something we would need to take a vote on in a public meeting, or if it's just something we can decide as a board over email or something. But given it is the end of September and fall is actually now officially upon us, I think it's a great time to ask for some clarity.
We do not have to vote on vendors. We vote to approve the budget, and then there are certain procurement rules that staff follows, but we don't have to vote on a specific vendor.
No, I'm sorry. I should be clearer. It's not so much that I'm asking us to approve a specific vendor. As I understand it, there were no bids. I guess I'm asking if we just need to, how we vote to take action to say, hey, we're going to do this or we're not going to do this. And like, if that's something we need to discuss in a working session, I'm trying to figure out, like, how do we come to a place where we're all on the same page and officially say we're going to take these, like, make these engagements happen or not?
Can I take a stab at it? And Mr. Hayworth, will you just jump in and correct me if I'm wrong about any of the logistics? Okay. So I think we as members can decide this is something we want to do. And so, for instance, if you as a committee chair, Representative Thompson, wanted to bring it to our next working session, you could do that and we could have a discussion about it. And I don't think we need to vote on it. Is that true, Mr. Hayworth? That is true. So I think we can just decide we want to do this. I think the big question, since we don't have a vendor to help us, is the logistics of it. So that is really just something we need to talk through, and figure out, if we do this, what's it going to look like? I think we have talked about this being a multi-committee venture. And so it would take coordinating, and we'd have to figure out who's going to do what. And I think something we've discussed before in our committee meeting is, what capacity does staff have at this point? I think they're spread pretty thin. That said, some of our projects are ending soon. So that's another question, is like timeline, and when do we want to start? And maybe we need to hear from Mr. Hayworth and staff around like what would make the most sense in terms of bandwidth for staff. I think does that answer your question?
I think so. I mean, I guess I'm trying to understand. Yes, so I definitely think that we would need to take into account the staff capacity. There's coordination required. I just wanted to be clear on like what was the decision-making process? Like what did we have to do to say, yes, we're moving forward or not? And I'm going to restate what I think I heard, which was that it does not have to be voted on at a public meeting. It could be discussed at a working session if we felt like that was necessary, but so does that mean the members can then weigh in like via email or, and maybe this is a question for John Paul, but I think my, the place of vagueness I have is just really around like, how is like, not what goes into the decision, but what is the process for making the decision?
I think that a committee, probably what would make the most sense is for a committee chair or multiple committee chairs to team up and come up with a proposal that you share at the working or before the working session so we can all discuss it. And then we can figure out how to move forward from there. Mr. Hayworth, did you want to add anything? Does that sound right?
Yes, that sounds right. I mean, I think the biggest questions are what do the committees want to do? And then from that, we can figure out what the capacity needs are for making that happen. And that's what the state board staff is for, is to make sure that the state board, that it happens the way that the members want. And we will do everything we can to do that.
I know that Representative Sutter is interested in this. And so maybe this is something that, oh, and also obviously the ANA committee, although I don't know. Yeah, so it seems like at least those three committees might want to have a conversation, whether it's on a Zoom call or in over email, and see if that's something you might want to collaborate on.
Yeah, I'm happy to take this offline. I just wanted to make sure that was okay, because I don't think anyone actually stated like, this is what we have to do. And I always want to do my best as a new member who's learning. What are the things we need to, vote on where? And so that was answered. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Just my 2 cents for that. As much as a board, we can move more efficiently, the better. And so if we can consolidate community engagement opportunities into one, I think that would be a good thing. So any other points of Vice President Gasoi?
This is thanks to Representative O'Leary's discipline with my child. I just wanted to present this new business, which you'll be seeing soon on my Mr. O'Leary. The new drawing, come on.
Hey, there you go.
So I just want you to know I'm going to be calling you up now when I need you to talk to Frankie about stuff, like when she's not listening to me. I told her to do this last week.
Listen, I have 5 children. The oldest is 51. And sometimes what I tell them is not what they do, but sometimes they do what I tell them to do. So it's
I don't know if you guys can see the cat too.
Other points.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Sorry.
Are there other points of new business?
No, I just want to say that Representative O'Leary has been on a roll this evening, and I have enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yes. Is there a motion to adjourn?
He'll make that.
And second it.
Are you pointing at John?
I was pointing at Zach.
Oh.
He's right next to me.
He moved
on my screen.
I'm next.
Of adjourning tonight's State Board public meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. It is 2:17 p.m. I'm sorry.
Wow.
Ouch.
It's 2:17 p.m. in
It's been a long
2001.
day, Mr. President.
8:17 p.m. And this meeting of the State Board of Education is called to a close.
Night, everyone.